The familiar scent of hospital-grade sanitizer clung to Isadora June Hart's cardigan as she rushed through Logan International Airport's Terminal B. Her long brown waves bounced with each hurried step, the emerald pendant around her neck, her mother's last gift, catching the morning light. Boston's spring sunshine streamed through the terminal's expansive windows, but Isadora barely noticed, too focused on making her 9 a.m. flight to San Francisco. Gate B32, B32, she muttered to herself, a habit that surfaced whenever anxiety crept. In the wait of the past few months, endless night shifts at Boston Children's Hospital's PICU, the bitter end of her engagement, the crushing loneliness, had finally pushed her to accept her sister Madison's invitation for a much-needed escape. Reaching the gate with minutes to spare, Isadora adjusted her comfortable sneakers and pulled her carry-on closer. Her fingers absently traced the collection of colorful pediatric pins decorating her bag, tiny reminders of the brave children who made her job worthwhile. Now boarding Group B, the gate agent announced. Isadora found her seat, 14A, window, and settled in, tucking her cardigan around herself like armor. As she fumbled with her phone to switch it to airplane mode, a deep voice broke through her concentration. "Excuse me, I believe I'm in 14B. She looked up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen. The man standing in the aisle was tall, his dark, slightly wavy hair just touching the collar of a well-worn leather jacket. His presence was commanding yet gentle, like a lighthouse on a quiet shore. "Oh, of course," Isadora shifted slightly, tucking her feet in to let him pass. She noticed how he ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that somehow made him seem more approachable. As he settled into his seat, she caught the scent of something earthy and warm, perhaps sandalwood. He pulled out a pair of headphones but didn't put them on, instead laying them in his lap like a safety net. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, and Isadora found herself stealing glances at her seatmate. His jawline was sharp beneath his well-maintained beard, but there was something soft in his expression as he politely watched the demonstration. The plane began to taxi, and Isadora's fingers instinctively wrapped around her mother's pendant. Takeoffs always made her nervous. "Not a fan of flying?" His voice was gentle, observant. She turned to find those blue eyes studying her with genuine concern. "Is it that obvious?" "The pendant," he gestured with a slight smile. "You've been holding it since we started moving." Isadora felt her cheeks warm. "It was my mother's. I suppose it's become a sort of comfort object." "Daniel," he offered, extending his hand. "Daniel Miller." "Isadora Hart," she replied, accepting the handshake. His grip was firm but careful, like someone used to measuring his own strength. "Though most people call me Isa." The plane accelerated down the runway, and Isadora's grip on the pendant tightened. Without comment, Daniel began speaking softly about the mechanics of takeoff, explaining the science behind each sound and sensation. His voice was steady, educational without being condescending, and she found herself relaxing despite herself. "You seem to know a lot about planes," she observed once they were safely in the air. Daniel shrugged, a modest gesture that seemed practiced. "I travel frequently for work. After a while, you pick things up." He paused, studying her bag. "Those are pediatric pins, aren't they?" "Yes," Isadora brightened, her fingers automatically reaching to touch a glittering butterfly pin, a gift from a young patient who'd recently won her battle with leukemia. "I'm a pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital, specializing in intensive care." "That must be challenging," Daniel said, his tone reflecting genuine respect rather than the usual pity or discomfort such revelations often brought. "It is, but it's also incredibly rewarding." Isadora found herself sharing stories about her tiny warriors, careful to maintain privacy but conveying the spirit of hope that pervaded her ward. "Children have this amazing resilience. They teach me something new every day." The conversation flowed naturally from there. Daniel spoke about his love for hiking and swimming, though he was vague about his work in business consulting. Isadora shared her dream of opening her own clinic someday, one that would provide comprehensive care to underserved communities. "What brings you to San Francisco?" Daniel asked as the flight attendant served their drinks. "Visiting my sister," Isadora replied, accepting a ginger ale. "She's been insisting I need a break from—" She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "From everything, really." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes distance provides the clarity we need. What about you?" "Business meeting," he said, that practiced modesty returning to his features. "But I'm hoping to squeeze in some hiking at Mount Tamalpais if time permits." Their conversation meandered through books they'd read, places they'd visited, and dreams they harbored. Isadora found herself charmed by the way Daniel's eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he listened with his whole body turned toward her, giving her his complete attention. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Isadora realized she hadn't touched her mother's pendant once since their conversation began. The 6-hour flight had passed like minutes. "I know this might seem forward," Daniel said as they gathered their belongings. "But would you like to exchange numbers? It would be nice to have a friendly face in Boston when we both return." Isadora hesitated for just a moment. Her recent experience with Nathan had left deep scars, but something about Daniel felt different, genuine in a way she couldn't quite explain. "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself with her certainty. They exchanged phones, each entering their number. As they walked through the terminal together, Isadora noticed how Daniel automatically adjusted his pace to match hers, how he positioned himself between her and the rushing crowds, small unconscious gestures of consideration. At the baggage claim, they prepared to part ways. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Isadora Hart," Daniel said, that warm smile returning. "Likewise, Daniel Miller," she replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest when he said her full name. As she watched him disappear into the crowd, Isadora felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not the desperate kind that had kept her in a toxic relationship with Nathan, but something lighter, purer, like the first warm breeze of spring after a long winter. Her phone buzzed with a text from Madison saying she was waiting outside. As Isadora headed toward the exit, she found herself smiling, her mother's pendant warm against her skin. Perhaps her sister was right. Sometimes you needed to leave everything behind to find exactly what you were looking for. The San Francisco fog rolled thick against Madison's apartment windows as Isadora curled up on the guest room's window seat, her phone glowing softly in the gray morning light. She smiled at the message that had just appeared. "Good morning from the other coast. Hope you're enjoying the famous SF fog. At least Boston's giving us sunshine today." It had been 3 days since the flight, and Daniel's messages had become a constant source of warmth in her daily routine. Their conversations flowed naturally, jumping from silly observations to deeper reflections with an ease that surprised her. "Someone's looking cheerful this morning," Madison commented, leaning against the doorframe with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Her older sister's intuition was as sharp as ever. "The mystery plane guy again?" Isadora accepted the coffee, breathing in its rich aroma. "His name is Daniel, and we're just talking." "Mm-hmm." Madison settled beside her, tucking her feet under her legs. "Just talking is exactly why you're glowing at 7 a.m. after a 6-hour flight across the country." "I'm not glowing," Isadora protested, but she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. "He's just different. When we talk, it feels real, no games, no pretense." Madison's expression softened. "After what Nathan put you through, you deserve someone real." She squeezed Isadora's hand. "Just promise me you'll stay open to the possibility of happiness." Isadora's phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. "Just past Boston Children's Hospital. Thought of you and your tiny warriors. How's the little butterfly pin-bearer doing?" Her heart warmed at his remembrance of their conversation about her patients. "He remembers the little details," she murmured, almost to herself. "The best ones always do," Madison said wisely, standing up. "Now come on, you promised to help me with brunch prep." The week in San Francisco passed in a blur of sisterly bonding, sightseeing, and constant messages with Daniel. He sent her photos of his morning runs along the Charles River, and she responded with pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge shrouded in mist. Their digital conversation deepened, touching on family, dreams, and the quiet fears they rarely shared with others. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough," Isadora typed late one night, curled up in her temporary bed. "Every child I lose in the PICU feels like a personal failure." Daniel's response came quickly. "The fact that you carry them with you shows exactly why you're the right person for this job. It's not about being perfect. It's about caring enough to keep trying." His words touched something deep within her, a truth she needed to hear. The night before her return flight, Daniel sent an unexpected message. "When you're back in Boston, would you like to grab coffee? I know this quiet place near the public garden." Isadora's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The memory of Nathan's betrayals whispered caution, but the genuine connection she felt with Daniel spoke louder. "I'd like that," she replied, her heart racing. 2 days later, Isadora found herself walking through Boston's public garden, the spring flowers painting the landscape in vibrant colors. She spotted Daniel before he saw her, standing near the entrance of a charming cafe, dressed in casual jeans and a soft gray Henley that somehow made his blue eyes even more striking. He looked up, and his face transformed with a smile that reached those eyes. "Isadora," he said, and somehow her full name sounded like poetry in his voice. "Daniel." She returned his smile, noting how he seemed both confident and slightly nervous, running a hand through his dark waves. The cafe was exactly as he described, quiet, intimate, with warm wooden tables and the rich scent of freshly ground coffee. They settled into a corner table, sunlight streaming through the window beside them. "How was your sister?" Daniel asked as their coffee arrived. "Madison's amazing. She has this way of making everything clearer." Isadora wrapped her hands around her cappuccino. "She's always been my rock, especially after we lost our mom." Daniel's eyes softened with understanding. "Tell me about her. Your mom?" No one had asked about her mother in years, not even Nathan during their long engagement. Isadora touched her pendant, gathering her thoughts. "She was magic," she said softly. "A kindergarten teacher who believed every child had a universe inside, them waiting to be discovered. I think that's why I became a pediatrician. Watching her with her students showed me how powerful it is to believe in someone when they're small and scared." Daniel reached across the table, his fingers gently brushing hers. The touch was brief but electric. "She sounds remarkable, like mother, like daughter." Isadora felt her cheeks flush. "What about your family?" A shadow crossed Daniel's features, so quick she almost missed it. "It's complicated. My parents are still together, but they're very focused on the family business. My younger sister, Charlotte, she's the only one who really gets me." There was something in his tone, a careful measure to his words that hinted at deeper waters, but Isadora didn't push. Everyone had their stories to tell in their own time. They spent hours in that cafe talking about everything and nothing. Daniel described his love for the outdoors, how he found peace in challenging hikes and early morning swims. Isadora shared stories about her patience, the tiny victories that made the hard days worthwhile. As afternoon light painted the cafe, walls golden, Daniel hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to take a walk through the garden? The tulips are in bloom." They strolled along the winding paths, their shoulders occasionally brushing. Near the lake, they paused to watch the swan boats glide past, carrying laughing families. "I used to dream about bringing my future children here," Isadora admitted, watching a little girl wave at the swans. "Silly, right?" "Not silly at all," Daniel said quietly. "Dreams like that, they're what make us human." She turned to look at him and found his gaze already on her, intense and gentle all at once. The spring breeze ruffled his hair, and Isadora fought the urge to reach up and smooth it back. "Isadora," he began, then stopped as his phone buzzed insistently. Looking at the screen, his expression tightened. "I'm sorry, I have to take this, work emergency." "Of course," she said, trying to hide her disappointment. "But I'd like to see you again," he added quickly. "Dinner, maybe? There's this small Italian place in the North End." "Yes," she said, surprising herself with her eagerness. "I'd love that." Later that night, as Isadora prepared for her evening shift at the hospital, her phone lit up with a message. "Thank you for today. It's rare to find someone who makes silence feel comfortable." She smiled, typing back, "Thank you for making me feel heard." As she walked through the hospital corridors, Isadora realized her mother's pendant felt different against her skin. Not like armor anymore, but like a blessing. Maybe Madison was right. Maybe staying open to happiness wasn't just a risk worth taking. It was the bravest thing she could do. The narrow cobblestone streets of Boston's North End whispered with history as Isadora made her way through the Friday evening crowd. The scent of garlic and fresh bread wafted from countless doorways, and strings of warm lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a gentle glow against the deepening twilight. She'd changed 3 times before settling on a flowing emerald dress that brought out her eyes, paired with comfortable ballet flats, a choice that proved wise on the uneven stones. Her heart fluttered as she approached Ristorante Lucia, a tiny establishment tucked between 2 brick buildings, its windows glowing with candlelight. Daniel waited outside, his tall frame leaning against the weathered brick. He wore dark slacks and a crisp white button-down with rolled sleeves, casual elegance that seemed effortless. When he spotted her, his whole body straightened, eyes brightening. "You look beautiful," he said softly, leaning in to kiss her cheek. The gesture was gentle, almost hesitant, but it sent warmth spreading through her chest. Inside, the restaurant was intimate, only 12 tables with exposed brick walls and vintage Italian posters. Their server, an elderly woman named Rosa, who spoke with a thick Italian accent, led them to a corner table partially hidden by a curved wall. "This place is magical," Isadora breathed, taking in the hand-painted wine bottles and fresh flowers on each table. "How did you find it?" A shadow of something, hesitation, crossed Daniel's face before he smiled. "I like finding hidden gems in the city, places that feel real, you know." Rosa returned with a bottle of wine Daniel had ordered, a vintage Tuscan red that made Isadora raise her eyebrows. "You know your wines?" "My father," he started, then paused. "Let's just say I had an interesting education in certain things." He quickly turned the conversation to her, asking about her day at the hospital. Isadora found herself sharing the story of a new patient, a 6-year-old named Phoenix who'd been admitted with a rare heart condition. "He's the bravest kid I've ever met," she said, twirling pasta on her fork. "Yesterday he told me he wasn't scared of surgery because superheroes have special hearts, and his is just showing him his superpower." Daniel's eyes softened. "What? Did you tell him?" "That he was absolutely right." She smiled, remembering Phoenix's gap-toothed grin. "Sometimes the best medicine is believing in magic." "You really love them, don't you? Your patients." "They're not just patients," Isadora said quietly. "Each one of them, they change me, make me better." She took a sip of wine, gathering courage. "After my mom died, I was so angry at the world, but these kids, they face things no child should face, and still they find reasons to smile. They teach me about hope." Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "You're remarkable, Isadora Hart." The way he looked at her, like she was something precious and rare, made her breath catch. But there was something else in his expression, a weight she couldn't quite understand. "Daniel," she said softly, "what aren't you telling me?" He tensed slightly, his hand stilling on hers. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes when you talk about your life, it feels like you're editing yourself. Like there are parts you're carefully stepping around." Daniel withdrew his hand, running it through his hair, that nervous gesture she'd come to recognize. "Everyone has things they're afraid to share," he said finally. "Are you afraid I won't like what I hear?" His blue eyes met hers, intense and vulnerable. "I'm afraid it will change how you see me." Before she could respond, Rosa appeared with dessert, 2 plates of tiramisu they hadn't ordered. "On the house," she announced with a knowing smile. "For lovebirds." The moment broke, replaced by shared laughter and the rich taste of coffee-soaked ladyfingers and mascarpone. They talked about lighter things, his latest hiking adventure, her sister's amusing dating stories, their shared love of old movies. After dinner, they walked through the North End's winding streets. The night had grown cooler and Daniel draped his jacket over her shoulders without being asked. It smelled like him, that hint of sandalwood and something uniquely Daniel. Near the Paul Revere house, string lights illuminated a small courtyard where a street musician played guitar. The melody was soft and sweet, drifting through the night air like a spell. "Dance with me?" Daniel asked suddenly, holding out his hand. Isadora laughed. "Here? Now?" "Why not?" His smile was boyish, genuine. Sometimes the best moments are the unplanned ones. She took his hand, letting him pull her close. They swayed together, her head resting against his chest where she could hear his heartbeat. His arms around her felt like coming home. "Isadora?" he murmured into her hair. "I want to be honest with you. About everything. I need a little time." She lifted her head to look at him. In the twinkling lights, his eyes held, a mix of fear and hope that made her heart ache. "We all have our stories, Daniel. When you're ready to share yours, I'll be here to listen." He leaned down, his forehead touching hers. For a moment they just breathed together, the guitar's melody wrapping around them like silk. "Can I kiss you?" he whispered. Instead of answering, Isadora rose on her tiptoes, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but then Daniel's hand cupped the back of her neck, drawing her closer. The world disappeared. There was only the warmth of his mouth, the solid strength of his arms, the way their hearts seemed to beat in perfect synchronization. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Daniel tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you on that plane." "Why didn't you?" "Some things are worth waiting for," he said simply. They walked back to her car hand in hand, stealing glances and small smiles. At her door, Daniel kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing every second. "Text me when you get home?" she asked, reluctant to let the evening end. "Promise." He kissed her forehead. "Sweet dreams, Isadora Hart." Later that night, tucked in her bed with her mother's pendant warm against her skin, Isadora's phone lit, up with a message. "Thank you for tonight. For the dance, the kiss, but most of all for making me believe that being myself, my whole self, might be enough." She smiled, typing back. It always was. As she drifted off to sleep, Isadora realized something had shifted inside her. The walls she'd built after Nathan, the careful distance she'd maintained from her own heart, they were crumbling. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what might rush in to fill the space. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of stolen moments and deepening connection. Between Isadora's hospital shifts and Daniel's mysterious business meetings, they carved out time for each other in the spaces between responsibilities. Coffee shop meetups turned into long walks along the Charles River, quick lunches evolved into cozy dinners at hidden restaurants, and text messages became long phone calls that stretched into the early hours of morning. One particularly rough. Night shift at Boston Children's Hospital, Isadora sat in the break room fighting back tears. Phoenix, her brave little warrior, had taken a turn for the worse. Her fingers trembled as she typed a message to Daniel. "Sometimes this job breaks my heart." Within minutes, her phone rang. "Tell me what happened." Daniel's voice was warm, steady. She told him everything. How Phoenix's heart had started failing, how his little hand had gripped hers as they rushed him to emergency surgery, how his mother's prayers echoed through the corridor. "I wish I could hold you right now," Daniel said softly. Isadora wiped her eyes. Just hearing your voice helps. Look outside the window. Confused, she walked to the break room window. There, in the hospital's parking lot, stood Daniel, phone to his ear, holding a paper bag from her favorite bakery. How did you... she started. I was in a meeting downtown when I got your text. Thought you might need something sweet to keep. You going? Minutes later, they sat on a bench in the hospital's small garden, sharing still warm chocolate croissants. Daniel had wrapped his jacket around her shoulders, and the familiar scent of sandalwood enveloped her like an embrace. You didn't have to come, she said, though her heart sang at his presence. I wanted to. He brushed a crumb from her cheek, his touch lingering. Besides, I had an ulterior motive. I want to take you somewhere special tomorrow night. Oh? Isadora raised an eyebrow. Where? It's a surprise, just wear something comfortable for walking. The next evening, Daniel picked her up in a sleek black SUV she hadn't seen before. He drove them out of the city, taking winding roads through Massachusetts countryside until they reached a hidden turnoff, marked only by an old stone wall. Should I be worried you're taking me to a secret location? She teased. Daniel's laugh held a nervous edge. Trust me? The path led them to a clearing on a hilltop. There, illuminated by strings of soft lights, stood a picnic setup that took Isadora's breath away. A plush blanket spread across the grass, surrounded by lanterns. A professional-looking telescope stood nearby, and a small portable speaker played classical music. Daniel, she breathed, this is incredible. The meteor shower peaks tonight, he explained, leading her to the blanket. I thought we could have dinner under the stars. The meal was extraordinary, champagne, fresh bread, imported cheeses, and dishes that definitely hadn't come from any regular catering service. As they ate, Daniel pointed out constellations, telling her the myths behind each one. How do you know all this? She asked, curled against his chest as they watched shooting stars streak across the sky. My grandfather, Daniel said softly. He used to take me stargazing when things got intense at home. He taught me that no matter how complicated life becomes, the stars remain constant. Something in his tone made Isadora look up at him. Was life often complicated? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his hand absently stroking her hair. Growing up with certain expectations can be suffocating. My grandfather understood that. He was the only one who saw me as just Daniel, not as... He trailed off. Not as what? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. Daniel checked it and his expression tightened. I'm sorry. I need to take this. It's work. He walked a few steps away, speaking in low, urgent tones. Phrases drifted back to Isadora. The London merger. Board meeting. Family trust. When he returned, there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Everything okay? She asked. Just business complications. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Where were we? Before she could press further, he distracted her by pointing out another meteor streaking across the sky. The moment for questions passed, but something nagged at the edges of Isadora's consciousness, a feeling that she was seeing only pieces of a larger picture. Later that night, as they packed up the picnic, Isadora noticed a small logo on the telescope's case, Miller Industries. She'd seen that name before in news headlines about one of the country's largest corporate empires. Daniel, she started, but he was already loading things into the SUV, his movements quick and efficient. The drive back was quieter, filled with comfortable silences and gentle classical music. Outside her apartment building, Daniel pulled her, close for a kiss that felt almost desperate in its intensity. Stay, she whispered against his lips. Something like pain crossed his features. I want to. God, I want to. But I have an early meeting tomorrow. Always meetings, she said lightly, though her chest tightened. Sometimes I wonder if you're secretly running the world. Daniel's laugh was strained. Just trying to keep my piece of it from falling apart. He kissed her again, softer this time. Rain check? That night, unable to sleep, Isadora found herself typing Miller Industries into her phone's search bar. The results made her heart stop. Headlines about the corporate giant's latest acquisitions, society page photos of charity galas, and there, an article about the company's heir apparent, Daniel Alexander Miller. The photo showed him in an expensive suit at some corporate event, looking almost like a stranger. The article mentioned billions in assets, a family legacy spanning generations, and expectations for the future CEO of one of America's largest private corporations. Isadora's hands shook as she closed the browser. The mysterious meetings, the expensive restaurants, the perfect picnic setup, it all made sense now. Daniel wasn't just successful. He was part of a world she'd never even imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "Can't stop thinking about you. Sweet dreams. Beautiful." She stared at the message, her mother's pendant suddenly heavy against her skin. The Daniel who brought her croissants after a hard shift, who danced with her in moonlit courtyards, who held her while they watched the stars. Was he the same person who moved billions with a signature? More importantly, why hadn't he told her? Across the city, in a penthouse office overlooking Boston Harbor, Daniel stood at the window, his phone in his hand. On his desk, a report detailed the latest moves by his corporate rivals. But his eyes were fixed on his wallpaper, a candid photo of Isadora laughing in the public garden, sunlight in her hair, completely unaware of the camera. He'd never meant to fall in love with someone so genuine, so untouched by his world of corporate politics and family expectations. He'd never meant to keep the truth from her for so long. But with each passing day, the fear of losing her authenticity, her unguarded smile, her way of seeing him as just Daniel, it paralyzed him. Running his hand through his hair, he made a decision. Tomorrow, he would tell her everything. He just prayed she would understand why he'd waited, and that the man she'd grown to care for was real, even if his circumstances weren't what she'd believed. Morning sunlight filtered through the hospital windows as Isadora finished her rounds, her mind still spinning from last night's discovery. She'd barely slept, torn between hurt at Daniel's deception and understanding of his hesitation. Every sweet moment they'd shared now felt tinted with questions. Had any of it been real? "Dr. Hart?" A nurse's voice broke through her thoughts. "There's someone asking for you at the nurse's station." Her heart jumped, thinking it might be Daniel. But as she rounded the corner, she froze. Standing there in an impeccable charcoal suit was Nathan Edward Collins, his dark eyes fixed on her with familiar intensity. "Nathan," she said, instinctively, gripping her tablet tighter. "What are you doing here? Can't an old friend check on you?" His smile was practiced charm, but there was something sharp behind it. Especially when said friend hears you're dating Daniel Miller. Isadora's blood ran cold. "How did you know?" Nathan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Boston's corporate world is smaller than you think, Isa. And Daniel Miller? He's about as big as they come." "This isn't the place for this conversation," she said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. "Fine. Coffee? That place across the street you used to love." Something in his tone, a mix of the old familiarity and new tension, made her agree. 20 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth at Bean and Brew, two untouched coffees between them. "How long have you known?" Isadora asked quietly. "About Miller. Please." Nathan's laugh was cold. "Our firms have been circling the same acquisition for months. Imagine my surprise when I saw security footage of him leaving your apartment building last week. You've been watching me?" "The building, Isa, for the deal." He leaned forward. "But let's talk about what's really interesting here. Does he know about us, about how you left me 2 months before the wedding? That has nothing to do with everything to do with it?" Nathan's eyes glittered. "You know what people will say, don't you? Poor little pediatrician trading up from one wealthy man to an even wealthier one. Very calculated." "That's not what happened." Isadora's voice shook with anger. You cheated on me. Repeatedly. Ancient history. He waved his hand dismissively. But think about it. How will it look to the Miller family? Their precious heir dating his business rival's ex-fiancé? Have you even told him about me? Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Morning, beautiful. Can we meet for lunch? There's something important I need to tell you. Her heart clenched. Now she knew what he wanted to say. He's texting you right now, isn't he? Nathan's voice was silk over steel. Let me guess. He's finally ready to confess his little secret? How convenient. You need to leave. Isadora stood, gathering her coat. Whatever game you're playing, no game, Isa. Nathan rose too, towering over her. Just looking out for an old friend. After all, if he's hidden something this huge, what else isn't he telling you? The words hit harder than she wanted to admit. Outside the coffee shop, Nathan caught her arm gently. One more thing, he said. The night you left me, I was going to tell you about a merger that would have set us up for life. Funny how history repeats itself. Isadora yanked her arm away, hurrying back to the hospital. Her mother's pendant felt like ice against her skin. In the elevator, she finally replied to Daniel, "Can't do lunch. Emergency at work." His response came quickly. "Everything okay? I can bring dinner to your place tonight. Really need to talk to you." Tears pricked at her eyes. Last night's Daniel, pointing out constellations and holding her close, felt a world away from the corporate titan Nathan had described. Which version was real? And why did it hurt so much to question it? Through her afternoon shifts, Isadora moved on autopilot. Even Phoenix's improved condition, his surgery had been successful, couldn't fully lift her spirits. Every time her phone buzzed with another message from Daniel, her stomach twisted. By evening, she'd made a decision. She needed time to think, to understand her own feelings without Nathan's insinuations or Daniel's explanations clouding her judgment. Not feeling well. Going to take a rain check on tonight, she texted Daniel. His reply was immediate. Please, Isadora. I know you found out about Miller Industries. Let me explain. Her fingers trembled as she typed. How long were you going to wait to tell me? The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response came. I wanted you to know me, just me, before my last name got in the way. Please give me a chance to explain in person. Memories flooded her mind. Daniel rushing to the hospital with croissants, his genuine interest in her patients' stories. The way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Had it all been calculated? A carefully crafted performance by someone used to managing perceptions? I need time, she wrote finally, to think about what's real and what isn't. Everything with you has been real, came his desperate reply. More real than anything in my life. But Nathan's words echoed in her head. If he's hidden something this huge, what else isn't he telling you? Isadora turned off her phone, pressing her mother's pendant to her lips. What would you do, Mom? She whispered into the empty break room. How do you trust someone who's hidden such a huge part of themselves? Later that night, alone in her apartment, Isadora curled up on her window seat, watching the city lights blur through her tears. On her coffee table, a magazine lay open to a society page photo of Daniel at a charity gala, looking polished and distant, so different from the man who danced with her in moonlit courtyards. Her doorbell rang, making her jump. Through the peephole, she saw a massive bouquet of wildflowers, her favorite, the kind that grew in hospital gardens and reminded her of hope. The card read, The stars we watched are still real, even if I didn't tell you everything about myself. The man who held you under them, that's who I am. Please let me prove it. Daniel. Isadora touched the delicate petals, her heart at war with itself. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that their connection transcended wealth and status. But Nathan's visit had shaken her more than she cared to admit, raising doubts she couldn't easily silence. Across the city, in his penthouse office, Daniel stared at his unanswered messages, a glass of untouched whiskey on his desk. On his computer screen, A corporate intelligence report detailed Nathan Collins's recent movements, including his visit to the hospital today. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration he couldn't suppress. He'd waited too long, tried too hard to preserve the pure connection they'd built. And now he might lose her anyway. Not to his wealth, but to his fear of sharing it. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to protect their relationship from his world, he might have destroyed it himself. 3 days passed like a fog. Isadora threw herself into her work, taking extra shifts at the hospital to avoid the growing stack of magazines in her apartment's recycling bin, each featuring some new angle on Daniel Miller, corporate heir, and Boston's most eligible bachelor. The flowers he'd sent sat in a vase by her window, a bittersweet reminder of what felt increasingly like a dream. Her phone contained 37 unread messages from him. She'd read the previews. "Please talk to me. I never meant to hurt you. Let me explain." Each one made her heart ache, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. Not yet. "Dr. Hart?" Phoenix's small voice pulled her from her thoughts. She was checking his vitals, trying to focus on the present moment. "Yes, sweetheart. You look sad, like my mom did when Dad went away." His small hand reached for hers. "Want to share my pudding? Mom says sweet things help sad hearts." Isadora blinked back tears, squeezing his hand gently. "You're very observant, aren't you?" That's what Daniel said too when he visited yesterday. Her head snapped up. "Daniel was here?" Phoenix nodded enthusiastically. "The nice man who brings you flowers. He came to read to the kids in the ward. He did all the funny voices for Where the Wild Things Are. Even made Joey laugh, and Joey never laughs during treatments." Isadora's chest tightened. She hadn't known Daniel had visited the pediatric ward. He hadn't mentioned it in any of his messages. "He asked about you," Phoenix continued, his young face serious. "He looked sad too, like when Max leaves the wild things." Before she could respond, her pager beeped. "Emergency in the PICU. I have to go, buddy. Save that pudding for later, okay?" The emergency kept her busy for hours. It wasn't until her late-night break that she had time to process what Phoenix had said. Opening her laptop, she searched the hospital's visitor logs. There it was. Daniel had spent 3 hours reading to the children in the oncology and intensive care wards. No press, no cameras, no corporate fanfare. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Madison. "Just saw the news. Call me when you can." Confused, Isadora pulled up a news site. Her blood ran cold at the headline. Miller Industries. Heir's new romance. Sources reveal complicated past with Collins Corp executive. The article was everything Nathan had threatened. Insinuations about her motives, carefully worded quotes from anonymous sources about her broken engagement, speculation about corporate espionage and strategic relationships. Her relationship with Daniel, something so genuine and private, had been twisted into tabloid fodder. Her phone rang. Madison. "Have you seen it?" her sister asked without preamble. "Just now." Isadora's voice shook. "Nathan did this. He came to see me a few days ago, threatened to... that snake." Madison's anger was palpable. "Have you talked to Daniel?" "No, I needed time to think." "Isa," Madison's voice softened. "Remember what Mom always said? Judge people by their actions in the quiet moments, not their words in the loud ones." Isadora touched her pendant, remembering. "But he lied to me, Maddie." "Did he? Or did he just wait to tell you something difficult? There's a difference between deception and fear." Before Isadora could respond, another call came through. An unknown number. "I have to go," she told Madison. "I'll call you back." Switching lines, she heard a familiar voice. "Miss Hart, this is Charlotte Miller, Daniel's sister." Isadora's heart jumped. "How did you get your number from the hospital administration? I'm sorry for the intrusion, but I needed to reach you before this gets worse." Charlotte's voice was warm but urgent. "My brother is an idiot, but he's an idiot in love. And what's happening now? The articles, the rumors, this is exactly why he keeps his guard up. I don't understand. Daniel was 19 when he first fell in love, Charlotte explained. She sold their private moments to a tabloid for 6 figures. Since then, every relationship has been scrutinized for ulterior motives. Until you. Isadora sank into a chair, remembering Daniel's words on their first date. Sometimes when you talk about your life, it feels like you're editing yourself. The night you met him on the plane, Charlotte continued, he was flying commercial specifically to avoid attention. He told me it was the first time in years someone looked at him and just saw him. Why are you telling me this? Because my brother is currently in a board meeting, fighting to keep your hospital's pediatric wing from being acquired by a medical conglomerate that would slash its funding. He's been working on it since he met you, since he saw how much those kids mean to you. He didn't tell you because he didn't want it to seem like he was trying to buy your affection. Tears slid down Isadora's cheeks. I need to go. Of course, he's not perfect, Miss Hart, but his heart is real. And in our world, that's rarer than any fortune. Ending the call, Isadora sat in the quiet break room, her mind racing. She thought of Daniel bringing her croissants after a hard shift, of him pointing out constellations and sharing his grandfather's stories, of him reading to sick children without telling her. Actions in the quiet moments, not words in the loud ones. Her phone buzzed with another news alert. Miller Industries blocks hostile takeover of Boston Children's Hospital wing. The accompanying photo showed Daniel leaving a corporate building, looking exhausted but determined. Before she could second guess herself, she opened his messages and began to type. The wildflowers are starting to wilt. His response was immediate. I'll bring fresh ones. No, she wrote, her heart pounding. I think we need to talk. Really talk. Name the place and time. I'll be there. Isadora took a deep breath, thinking of all the quiet moments that had led them here. The garden where you brought me croissants. After my shift ends at midnight. I'll wait as long as it takes. Looking out the break room window at the hospital, garden below, Isadora could already see a familiar figure settling onto their bench, prepared to wait hours if necessary. Even from this distance, she recognized his nervous habit, running his hand through his hair, a gesture that made him seem so human, so real despite the wealth and power he carried. Her mother's pendant felt warm against her skin, like a gentle reminder. Maybe Madison was right. Maybe there was a difference between deception and fear. And maybe, just maybe, the truest measure of love wasn't in the secrets kept, but in the quiet ways they chose to show up for each other, day after day. The upcoming conversation wouldn't be easy. There were still hurts to heal, truths to face, and a complex future to navigate. But as Isadora watched Daniel in the garden below, patiently waiting in the cold night air, she realized something important. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't in grand gestures or perfect honesty from the start, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to risk everything for the chance to be truly known. She touched her mother's pendant one last time, gathering strength. 2 hours remained in her shift. 2 hours to decide if love was worth the leap of faith it always demanded. In the garden below, Daniel looked up at the hospital windows, as if sensing her gaze, and in that moment, Isadora knew her heart had already made its choice. The hospital garden was different at midnight. Shadows played across the carefully tended flower beds, and the usual sounds of the city seemed muffled, as if the world was holding its breath. Daniel sat on their bench, his suit jacket rumpled from hours of waiting, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it countless times. When Isadora stepped into the garden, still wearing her scrubs with her mother's pendant gleaming at her throat, he stood so quickly he nearly stumbled. They stared at each other across the moonlit space, two people with so much to say and no easy place to begin. You read to the children, she said finally. Daniel's hand went to his hair, that nervous tell she'd grown to love. Phoenix is a great kid. He told me all about his superhero heart. Why didn't you tell me you came? I didn't want you to think I was trying to manipulate you. He took a hesitant step forward. Everything I've done since meeting you. I've questioned my motives 1,000 times, terrified that any gesture would seem like an attempt to buy forgiveness. Isadora moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the worry, lines etched around his mouth. Your sister called me. Charlotte? Daniel looked surprised, then worried. Whatever she said, she told me about your first love, about the tabloids. His face tightened with old pain. I was young, naive, thought love was enough to overcome the reality of my world. He laughed bitterly. Woke up to find our private moments splashed across magazines, each memory priced and sold. Is that why you didn't tell me about Miller Industries? Partly. Daniel sank back onto the bench, his shoulders heavy. But mostly I was selfish. Those first moments with you on the plane, the way you looked at me like I was just me. No expectations, no agenda. I hadn't felt that free since my grandfather took me stargazing. Isadora sat beside him, leaving a small space between them. Tell me about him. Your grandfather. Daniel's eyes softened with memory. He built Miller Industries from nothing, but he never let it define him. Even at the height of his success, he kept the same battered telescope, wore the same old hiking boots. He turned to look at her. The night before he died, he told me something I've never forgotten. The world will try to make you choose between being successful and being real. Don't let it. But you did let it, Isadora said quietly. You split yourself in two. Daniel, Miller the heir, and just Daniel with me. I thought I was protecting us both. His voice cracked. The irony is, trying to keep my world separate ended up threatening everything we built. Nathan came to see me, she admitted. He's the one who leaked the story to the press. Daniel's hands clenched. I know. I saw the security footage from your building. He met her eyes. Why didn't you tell me about him? The same reason you didn't tell me about your wealth, I suppose. Isadora touched her pendant. Some pains are hard to share. I read the article he planted. Daniel's voice was tight with anger. The implications about your motives, about us. Hey! Isadora reached for his hand, surprising them both. Those stories? They're not us. They're not the man who brings me croissants after rough shifts, or reads to sick children without wanting credit. They're not the woman who fell in love with a stranger on a plane before she knew anything about his bank account. Daniel's breath caught. Fell in love? Isadora felt tears well in her eyes. Why do you think it hurt so much? Finding out about your world, feeling like I might have been naive again. I've already lived through one relationship built on lies. The thought that ours might be too. No. Daniel turned fully toward her, taking both her hands in his. Isadora, everything between us has been real. Every laugh, every conversation, every moment under the stars. I'm the same man who danced with you in the North End, who learns the names of your patients, who can't sleep at night without hearing your voice. But you're also Daniel Miller, corporate heir and future CEO. Yes. He squeezed her hands. And that part of my life comes with complications I should have prepared you for. Press attention, society obligations, family expectations. But none of that changes who I am when I'm with you. What about the hospital wing? She asked. Charlotte told me what you did. Daniel looked away, embarrassed. I didn't do it to impress you. I did it because I saw how much those kids mean to you, how devastating it would be to lose the resources they need. I did it because... He struggled for words. Because loving you has made me want to be the kind of man who uses his power to protect what matters. Isadora reached up, turning his face back to hers. That's exactly why I fell in love with you. Not the power, but the heart behind how you use it. I should have told you everything sooner. His blue eyes were fierce, with sincerity. I should have trusted that you would understand, that you would see me, all of me, the way you've seen me from the start. Yes, you should have. Isadora smiled softly. But I understand why you were afraid. We all have scars, Daniel. The question is whether we let them keep us from trying again. And what's your answer to that question? His voice was barely a whisper. Instead of responding, Isadora closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with all the emotion they'd held back. Daniel's arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer until she was practically in his lap, her hands in his hair, his heart thundering against hers. When they finally parted, breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Isadora Hart. Every complicated, beautiful piece of you. I love you too. She smiled. Every version of you. The stargazer, the corporate titan, and especially the man who does funny voices while reading children's books. Daniel laughed, the sound pure and free. Phoenix said I need to work on my wild thing roar. We'll practice, she promised, settling into his embrace. Above them, stars peeked through the city's light pollution, constant and true, just like his grandfather had taught him. What happens now? She asked softly. Now? Daniel kissed her temple. Now we face whatever comes together. No more secrets, no more divided worlds. Just us, building something real in the midst of all the noise. Isadora nodded, her mother's pendant warm between them like a blessing. In the quiet garden where their story had seen both tears and joy, they held each other, understanding that love wasn't about perfect beginnings or unblemished pasts. It was about choosing each other, day after day, through complications and clarity alike. The night shift workers moving through the hospital above might have seen them there. The pediatrician and the billionaire, wrapped in each other's arms on a simple garden bench. But they wouldn't have seen what mattered. Two hearts finally, beating in complete truth, ready to face whatever storms might come together. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a beautiful dream punctuated by moments of stark reality. Daniel and Isadora's reconciliation had brought them closer, but it had also thrust them into the spotlight neither had wanted. Paparazzi lingered outside the hospital, hoping to catch photos of Boston's most talked-about couple. Society columnists speculated endlessly about the fairy tale romance between the corporate heir and the dedicated doctor. Just ignore them, Daniel murmured one morning as they made their way through a small crowd of photographers outside her apartment. His arm was protective around her waist, his body angled to shield her from the flashing cameras. Dr. Hart, is it true you left Nathan Collins for Daniel Miller? Mr. Miller, comment on the Collins Corp merger rumors. Isadora, over here. Inside Daniel's SUV, Isadora let out a shaky breath. Does it ever get easier? Yes and no. He squeezed her hand. But we'll figure it out together. They had settled into a rhythm, finding ways to protect their privacy, while sharing their lives more openly. Daniel had given her access codes to his private parking garage, ensuring she could visit his penthouse without running the media gauntlet. She had introduced him to her favorite hidden spots in the city, tiny bookstores and hole-in-wall cafes where they could just be themselves. That morning, they were headed to the hospital for a special occasion. Phoenix was being discharged after his successful recovery. Ready for your grand performance? Isadora teased, straightening Daniel's collar. He had promised Phoenix one last reading session, complete with an improved wild thing roar. I've been practicing in the shower, he grinned, then grew serious. The foundation paperwork is ready, by the way. Once you approve the final details. Isadora's heart swelled. After their reconciliation, Daniel had proposed creating a foundation to support pediatric care for underprivileged children, but instead of simply funding it, he had insisted Isadora take the lead in shaping its mission and programs. Still feels surreal, she admitted. Running a foundation, being in board meetings. Hey. Daniel turned to face her. You're the heart of this project, the money? That's just fuel for your vision. They reached Phoenix's room to find him already dressed in his going-home clothes, clutching his favorite book. His mother, Christina, was packing the last of their belongings. Daniel, Phoenix's face lit up. Did you practice your roar? Did I ever? Daniel dropped into the chair beside the bed, winking at Isadora. But first, I have a surprise for you. He pulled out a package wrapped in Wild Things paper. Inside was a telescope, smaller than the one from their stargazing date, but professional quality. For our next astronomer, Daniel explained as Phoenix's eyes widened, because every superhero needs a way to study the stars. Christina's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Miller, this is too much. Please, it's just Daniel. He smiled warmly. And it's not from me. It's from the Phoenix Foundation's first initiative, Dreams Beyond Diagnosis. Isadora watched the scene unfold, her heart so full it hurt. This was the Daniel she'd fallen in love with, the man who remembered small details, who used his resources not to impress but to bring joy. The reading session that followed was magical. Daniel's improved roar had the entire pediatric ward in stitches, and even some nurses stopped to listen. As Phoenix hugged them goodbye, Isadora noticed Daniel discreetly passing Christina an envelope, likely containing support for Phoenix's ongoing care. Later, walking hand in hand through the hospital corridors, Isadora said softly, "You're amazing with them. The kids. Their families. I had a good teacher." Daniel pulled her closer. Speaking of teaching, dinner with Charlotte tonight? She's dying to properly meet you." "I'd love that." Isadora hesitated. "But first, there's something you should see." In her office, she pulled up an email on her computer. It came this morning. Daniel read the message, his expression darkening. It was from Nathan, supposedly addressed to the hospital board but accidentally copied to Isadora. Given recent revelations about Dr. Hart's personal relationships with key figures in ongoing corporate negotiations, questions must be raised about potential conflicts of interest in the pediatric wing's management. "He's trying to undermine your position here," Daniel growled. "Make it look like our relationship compromises your professional judgment." "There's more." Isadora pulled up a news site. The headline made Daniel's jaw clench. Collins Corp executive reveals Miller's romance a strategic move in hospital takeover. That manipulative. Daniel stopped, taking a deep breath. "I'll handle this." "Daniel." Isadora touched his arm. "Handle it how?" He softened at her concern. "Legally, ethically, I promise." He ran a hand through his hair. "But Nathan needs to understand he can't hurt you to get to me." "Maybe that's not what he wants." Isadora's voice was quiet. "Maybe he's trying to hurt me because I hurt him." Daniel's eyes searched her face. "Do you regret it? Leaving him?" "No." Her answer was immediate. "But I regret not seeing him clearly sooner, not recognizing the manipulation, the control." She touched her pendant. "My mom would have seen through him immediately." Daniel pulled her into his arms, kissing her forehead. "Your mom would be proud of how strong you've become, and so am I." A knock at the door interrupted them. Charlotte stood there, impeccably dressed in a designer suit that somehow looked effortlessly casual. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "Not looking sorry at all. But we have a situation. Nathan Collins just called a press conference. He's announcing a competing pediatric care initiative and claiming it was originally your idea, Isadora, from your time together." Isadora felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not possible. He never cared about—" "Of course he didn't," Charlotte cut in. "But he's playing a dangerous game, making you look like you used both him and Daniel for philanthropic gain." Daniel's phone buzzed. His corporate lawyers. "We need to move. Fast," he said, eyes meeting Isadora's. "But I won't do anything without your approval. This is your life, your reputation." Isadora squared her shoulders, feeling a strength she hadn't known she possessed. No more hiding, no more letting Nathan control the narrative. She looked between the Miller siblings. "What do we do?" Charlotte's smile was fierce. "First, we have dinner. All of us. Then we plan how to show Boston, and Nathan, what real integrity looks like." As they left the hospital, another wave of photographers waited. But this time Isadora didn't flinch. She held Daniel's hand firmly, her head high. Let them take their pictures. Let them spin their stories. The truth was in the little moments, in improved wild thing roars, in telescopes given with love, in the way Daniel looked at her like she was the real fortune. In the car, Daniel pulled her close. You okay? Better than okay? Isadora smiled, touching her pendant. For the first time, I'm not afraid of what's coming, because whatever it is, we're facing it together. Together, Daniel echoed, his voice full of promise. Above them, though hidden by the city's bright lights, the stars held their course, constant and true, watching over two hearts that had found their way to each other against all odds, ready to fight for the love they'd built. One quiet moment at a time. The Miller Industries conference room commanded a stunning view of Boston Harbor, but no one was admiring the scenery. Daniel stood at the head of the long table, his usual calm demeanor hardened into something fiercer as he addressed. The board members and press representatives gathered for the emergency meeting. The allegations made by Nathan Collins are not only false, Daniel stated, his voice steady but charged with conviction. They represent a calculated attempt to undermine the legitimate humanitarian work of both Dr. Hart and our foundation. Isadora sat beside Charlotte, her back straight, dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress that Daniel's sister had helped her choose. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, but she refused to shrink under the scrutiny. Mr. Collins claims the Phoenix Foundation was his original initiative, a reporter called out, that Dr. Hart took the concept from their time together. That's impossible, a new voice interrupted. Christina, Phoenix's mother, stood in the doorway, clutching a folder. Because I have proof of when the real inspiration came. Daniel's eyes met Isadora's across the room. Neither of them had expected this. Christina walked forward, her head high despite her obvious nervousness. 6 months ago, when my son was first admitted, Christina continued, Dr. Hart spent hours helping me understand our options, our insurance limitations. She was the one who created a network of resources for families like mine, long before she ever met Mr. Miller. She opened the folder, revealing dozens of documents, handwritten notes, resource lists, preliminary program outlines, all in Isadora's writing, all dated well before she'd ended things with Nathan. Dr. Hart didn't need a wealthy man's influence to care about helping children. Christina's voice grew stronger. She was already doing it every day with whatever resources she could gather. The room erupted in questions, but a commotion at the door silenced everyone. Nathan Collins strode, in his tailored suit and practiced smile, a sharp contrast to the tension in the air. How touching, he drawled. But Isadora could see the anger beneath his polished exterior. But let's talk about the real issue here. Corporate espionage. Daniel's hand clenched on the podium. Choose your next words carefully, Collins. Oh, I have. Nathan's smile turned cruel. How convenient that Miller Industries blocked our hospital acquisition right after I confided our plans to my then-fiancé. How strategic that she then connected with our primary competitor. That's enough. Isadora stood, her voice cutting through his accusations. For the first time since Nathan had entered her hospital days ago, she felt no fear, only clarity. You want to talk about timing, Nathan? Let's talk about how you waited until I discovered your affairs to suddenly develop an interest in pediatric care. Let's discuss how you used my passion for helping children as a weapon when you couldn't control me anymore. The room fell silent. Nathan's facade cracked slightly. Dr. Hart, she corrected firmly. And I kept detailed records of every conversation we ever had about hospital initiatives. She nodded to Charlotte, who distributed folders to the board members. You'll note that in 3 years together, Mr. Collins showed zero interest in pediatric care. In fact, he repeatedly dismissed it as, quote, a financial drain with no real return on investment. Daniel moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and supportive. The timing of our hospital intervention had nothing to do with corporate strategy, he addressed the room. It was about protecting vital medical services for children who need them, something Dr. Hart has dedicated her life to, long before she met either of us. Which brings us to your press conference announcement, Charlotte added smoothly, clicking to display a series of documents on the wall screen. We've identified 7 instances where your original initiative directly plagiarized Dr. Hart's existing programs she developed and documented while working at Boston Children's Hospital. Nathan's composure finally cracked. You really think you've won? He snarled at Isadora. That playing happy families with the Millers will erase what you are? A social climber who what? Daniel's voice was deadly quiet. Who dedicates her nights to saving children? Who builds support systems for struggling families? Who sees people for who they are, not what they're worth? He stepped forward, his presence commanding. The only person here trying to climb socially is you, Nathan, and you're using lies about a remarkable woman to do it. I can destroy you, Nathan threatened, but his voice wavered. No, Isadora said softly, touching her mother's pendant. You can't, because everything I've built, my career, my relationships, my dreams for helping others, they're built on truth. Something you never understood. Christina stepped forward again, this time accompanied by several other parents, whose children had been treated in Isadora's ward. One by one, they shared stories of Isadora's dedication, of programs she'd created long before meeting Daniel, of the difference she'd made in their lives. Nathan's face grew increasingly pale as his narrative crumbled. When security finally escorted him out, his threats had diminished to desperate whispers. In the aftermath, as reporters clamored for statements and board members offered congratulations, Daniel pulled Isadora into a quiet corner. I'm so proud of you, he murmured, touching her cheek. Standing up to him, defending your truth. Our truth, she corrected, leaning into his touch. I couldn't have done this without you, without your support. Not your money or influence, but your belief in me. Always, he promised, then smiled. Though I have to admit, watching you take him down was incredibly attractive. Isadora laughed, the sound bright with relief and joy. I learned from the best. Your sister is terrifying. By the way, speaking of, Daniel's eyes twinkled. She's arranged a little celebration. The whole pediatric ward is waiting. What did you do? Nothing much, he said innocently. Just hired a few therapy dogs, some professional storytellers, and maybe transformed the garden into a starlit wonderland. Isadora kissed him, not caring who saw. I love you, Daniel Miller. I love you too, Dr. Hart. His smile softened. Ready to go make some kids smile? Lead the way. As they left the corporate battlefield behind, hand in hand, Isadora felt a profound sense of peace. The truth hadn't just set her free, it had shown her exactly where she belonged, not in Nathan's world of manipulation and control, but here, with a man who used his power to light up children's eyes, who fought not for corporate dominance, but for what was right. In the hospital garden later that evening, watching Daniel lead a group of giggling patients in his now perfect Wild Thing roar, while therapy dogs wagged their tails and fairy lights twinkled overhead, Isadora touched her mother's pendant and smiled. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't won in boardrooms or headlines, but in moments like these, where love, truth, and purpose came together to create something magical. 3 months after the confrontation with Nathan, life had settled into a new rhythm. The media frenzy had died down, replaced by occasional positive coverage of the Phoenix Foundation's successful programs. Nathan had accepted a position across the country, his attempts at revenge fading into corporate gossip. But Isadora noticed subtle changes in Daniel's behavior. He seemed distracted, nervous even, running his hands through his hair more frequently than usual. Their regular dinners often ended with him checking his phone, exchanging cryptic texts with Charlotte. Everything okay? She asked one evening as they walked through the public garden, the late summer breeze carrying the scent of blooming roses. Perfect, he answered too quickly, then softened. Just some foundation details to finalize. But Isadora knew better. After 6 months together, she could read the tiny tells in his expression. the way his thumb absently rubbed his father's old watch when something weighed on his mind. A week later, Daniel suggested a weekend trip. Remember that hilltop where we watched the meteor shower? How could I forget? Isadora smiled, touching her pendant. It's where everything almost fell apart. And where it began to come together, he corrected, kissing her temple. Pack something warm. The nights are getting cooler. They drove up on Friday evening, the sun setting in brilliant oranges and pinks. But instead of the clearing being empty as before, Isadora gasped at what awaited them. Thousands of tiny lights created a pathway through the trees, leading to a setup that took her breath away. The original picnic blanket was there, but surrounded now by soft cushions and lanterns. The professional telescope stood ready, but beside it was a smaller one, identical to the one they'd given Phoenix. "Daniel," she whispered, "what is all this?" He took her hand, leading her along the illuminated path. As they walked, she noticed small photos hanging from the trees, moments from their story. Their first coffee shop date, Daniel reading. To the children, their dance in the North End, quiet moments in the hospital garden. "I've been thinking about the stars," Daniel said softly, his voice carrying in the evening quiet. "About what my grandfather said about them being constant, true." He stopped at the blanket, turning to face her. But he was wrong about one thing. "Oh?" "The stars don't stay constant on their own. They're part of something bigger. Galaxies, constellations, patterns that give them meaning." His blue eyes shone with emotion. "Just like I was just existing before I met you. You gave my life its pattern, its meaning." Isadora's heart began to race as Daniel reached into his pocket, dropping to one knee on the soft blanket. "The day I sat next to you on that plane, I was running from my name, my responsibilities, everything I thought was weighing me down." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a ring that sparkled like captured starlight. "But you showed me that true love doesn't ask us to be less than we are. It challenges us to be more, to use our gifts, our privileges, our hearts to make the world better." Tears slipped down Isadora's cheeks as Daniel continued, his voice thick with emotion. "You make me better, Isadora Hart. You make me want to be the man who deserves your trust, your strength, your incredible capacity for love." He held up the ring. "This was my grandmother's, the woman who taught my grandfather that real wealth isn't in bank accounts but in how we touch others' lives. She would have adored you." "Daniel," Isadora whispered, her mother's pendant warm against her racing heart. "I don't want to just walk beside you, Isadora. I want to build a life with you, one filled with starlit moments, children's laughter, and the kind of love that makes everything else make sense." His hands trembled slightly. "Will you marry me?" Instead of answering immediately, Isadora knelt with him on the blanket, taking his face in her hands. "You've planned this whole beautiful moment, but there's something you should know first." Daniel's eyes widened with concern, but she smiled through her tears. "I'm pregnant." His face transformed with wonder. We're having a baby," she confirmed softly. "I found out yesterday. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." Daniel pulled her into his arms with a joyful laugh that echoed across the hilltop. When he kissed her, she could taste the salt of happy tears. His or hers, she couldn't tell. "So," he said when they finally parted, both breathless and glowing. "About that question." Isadora laughed, pure joy bubbling up from her soul. "Yes, Daniel Miller. Yes to marriage, to babies, to stargazing forever, to all of it." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, nestling beneath her mother's pendant like it was always meant to be there. As Daniel helped her to her feet, movement at the tree line caught her attention. Charlotte emerged with a camera, followed by Madison, both women wiping tears. "You knew?" Isadora asked her sister. "Of course," Madison grinned. "Who do you think helped him hang all those photos?" More figures emerged from the trees. Christina and Phoenix, their hospital family, even Daniel's parents looking surprisingly human as they watched their son's happiness. "Hope you don't mind," Daniel murmured in her ear. "I thought we could celebrate with everyone we love." Phoenix ran forward, brandishing his telescope. "Can we see Jupiter tonight?" Daniel promised. It would be visible. "First," Charlotte called out, "champagne for the adults, sparkling cider for our junior astronomer, and—" She paused dramatically. "I believe we need to toast to an extra special surprise." Daniel's parents gasped as he announced the pregnancy, his mother actually crying as she hugged Isadora. "Another star in our constellation," she whispered. Later, as their loved ones chatted and Phoenix gave an impromptu astronomy lesson, Daniel held Isadora close beneath the vast sky. "Happy?" he asked softly. Beyond words. She turned in his arms. "You know what I thought when I first saw you, on that plane? That you looked like someone who understood loneliness. And now? Now you look like someone who understands love." She touched her still flat stomach. "Who's ready to build something extraordinary?" "We already have," he smiled, kissing her tenderly. Above them the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, bearing witness to a love story that had defied expectations and transcended worlds. On a hilltop in Massachusetts, surrounded by fairy lights and family, Daniel and Isadora began writing their next chapter, one that would be filled with midnight hospital runs and corporate negotiations. With children's laughter and quiet moments of grace, Phoenix's voice rang out. "Look, a shooting star." Everyone turned to watch the streak of light arc across the sky. Isadora felt Daniel's arms tighten around her, his hand resting protectively over their growing miracle. "Make a wish," he whispered. But standing there, her mother's pendant gleaming beside her engagement ring, their child growing beneath her heart, and their future stretching out before them like an endless field of stars, Isadora realized she had nothing left to wish for. Everything she needed was right here, written in the constants of their love. 5 years later, the Miller Foundation Children's Hospital gleamed in the morning sun, its modern architecture softened by colorful murals and welcoming gardens. Inside the pediatric wing, tiny footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by delighted giggles. "Aurora Grace Miller," Isadora called out, trying to sound stern but failing to hide her smile. "No running in the corridors, young lady." The 4-year-old girl skidded to a stop, her dark curls bouncing and blue eyes, so like her father's, sparkling with mischief. She wore a miniature doctor's coat over her dress, complete with a child-sized stethoscope and a name tag that read, "Dr. Aurora, Junior Healer." "But Mommy, Phoenix is teaching me about the new telescope in the stargazing room," Aurora protested, bouncing on her toes. Now 16, Phoenix had become a regular volunteer at the hospital, especially in the astronomy program Daniel had established for long-term patients. The same telescope that had once given him hope now helped other children dream beyond hospital walls. "Dr. Aurora," Christina called from the nurse's station, now the hospital's patient care coordinator. "Want to help me give out the Morning Star stickers?" Aurora beamed, skipping, not running, to help with their tradition of giving Golden Star stickers to brave patients after procedures. Isadora touched her mother's pendant, now accompanied by both her wedding ring and a constellation pattern bracelet Daniel had given her when Aurora was born. So much had changed in 5 years, yet the core of their love remained constant as the stars themselves. The foundation had transformed pediatric care across New England, with innovative programs that combined medical excellence with emotional support. Daniel had gradually stepped back from daily Miller Industries operations, focusing instead on their philanthropic work, while grooming Charlotte to take the corporate reins. "There's my favorite doctor," a familiar voice murmured. Daniel rapped, his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Despite his casual clothes, he'd long since abandoned suits for hospital visits. He still carried that same quiet strength she'd first felt on the plane. "Which one?" Isadora teased. "Your wife, the chief of pediatrics, or your daughter, the self-proclaimed head of sticker medicine?" "Both," he laughed, then placed a hand gently on her growing belly. "And this little one too, when she's ready." Their second daughter, already named Celeste, was due in 3 months. Aurora was convinced her baby sister would arrive on a shooting star, Did you tell her yet? Daniel asked softly. Not yet. I thought we could do it together, in the garden. They found Aurora in the hospital's rooftop garden, her favorite place where butterflies danced among the flowers and a special telescope stood ready for impromptu stargazing. She was sitting with Madison, who had recently joined the hospital's child psychology team. Princess, Daniel called, using his special nickname for her. Mommy and I have a surprise. Aurora climbed into his lap as they settled on their bench, the same one where Daniel and Isadora had shared so many moments of their own love story. Remember how you said the stargazing room needs more telescopes? Isadora began. Aurora nodded seriously, for when lots of kids want to see the stars at the same time. Well, Daniel continued, we thought maybe we could build a whole new room, a special place with a glass dome ceiling, where children can see the stars even from their beds. Aurora's eyes widened. Like a sky hospital? Exactly, Isadora smiled. And we thought you could help us design it, maybe add some of your drawings to the walls? Can we call it the Aurora Sky Room? Their daughter asked, then quickly added, and Celeste, for baby sister too. Daniel and Isadora exchanged surprised looks. How did you know we're naming her Celeste? Daniel asked. Aurora rolled her eyes in a perfect imitation of her Aunt Charlotte. Daddy, you and Mommy always talk about stars, it's obvious. She pronounced the word carefully, clearly proud of using her new vocabulary. Laughing, Daniel pulled both his girls closer. Above them, though hidden by daylight, the stars continued their eternal dance, just as they had the night he'd proposed, the morning Aurora was born, and every moment of their shared journey. Later that evening, after Aurora had fallen asleep, clutching her latest constellation drawing, Daniel found Isadora in their home observatory. She stood by the telescope, the same one from their first stargazing date, one hand on her pendant, the other on her belly. Penny for your thoughts, Dr. Miller? He asked softly. Just thinking about how one plane ride changed everything, she smiled. How the universe conspired to put us in exactly the right place at the right time. Daniel wrapped her in his arms, his hand joining hers over their growing daughter. The universe, Not just your delayed flight and my sudden desire to fly commercial? Call it what you will. Isadora turned in his embrace. But something bigger than us knew we needed each other. As if in agreement, Aurora's nightlight cast star-shaped patterns across the observatory walls, creating their own private constellation. A map of the love that had grown from a chance meeting into a universe of possibilities. Outside, the Boston skyline sparkled like earthbound stars, while above, the real ones kept their ancient vigil. In the quiet of their observatory, Daniel and Isadora held each other, their hearts beating in time with the rhythm of their own special infinity. A love story written not just in the stars but in every life they touched, every child they helped, and every dream they dared to make real. Aurora's voice drifted from her room, singing the lullaby Daniel had written for her. Twinkle, twinkle, little heart, how I love you from the start. And in that moment, their past, present, and future aligned like perfect stars in an endless sky, promising more magic yet to come. The end. In a world where appearances often mask the truth, Daniel chose to hide his identity from Isadora for fear that his wealth would change the way she saw him. If you were in Daniel's shoes, would you have revealed your true identity right from the start? Or would you also have waited for the emotional connection to strengthen first? What weighs more, immediate honesty or the chance to be known for who you really are, beyond appearances? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.